Renovating an old bar should mean paint, dust, and stress. Not an infuriatingly attractive winemaker showing up out of nowhere, always with a new excuse and the same "this will fail" look. She wants a fresh start. He wants something. And the worst part? She can feel herself losing the game without even knowing the rules. Stella Morrison had been driving for 5 hours straight, and her patience had evaporated somewhere around mile marker 347. The GPS on her phone kept recalculating the route, the robotic voice cheerfully announcing turns that didn't exist. Her mother's voice still echoed in her head from their last phone call. "Please, Stella, your Aunt Cecilia needs you. The bar is all she has left." The bar, a decaying establishment in the middle of nowhere that served wine to locals who probably couldn't tell a Cabernet from grape juice. Stella had a career waiting for her back in San Francisco, a promotion she'd been working toward for 3 years. But family was family, and her mother's guilt trips were legendary. The landscape had shifted from highway monotony to rolling hills covered in vineyards. She had to admit it was beautiful in a rustic postcard kind of way. Not that she planned to stay long enough to appreciate it. 2 weeks, maximum. Fix whatever disaster her aunt had created, hire a manager, and get back to civilization. "In 500 feet, turn right," the GPS announced. Stella squinted at the narrow street ahead. It looked more like an alley than a proper road, barely wide enough for one vehicle. But the little blue dot on her screen insisted this was the correct route to Hillside Avenue, where her aunt's bar supposedly stood. She turned onto the street, her sedan scraping against an overhanging branch. Great. Just great. Her eyes scanned the buildings, looking for the faded sign her mother had described. There, on the left, barely visible, Cecilia's corner. Her attention split between the GPS and the buildings. Stella didn't see the pickup truck parked ahead until it was too late. The crunch of metal against metal echoed through the quiet street like a gunshot. "No, no, no!" Stella slammed on the brakes, her heart hammering. She gripped the steering wheel, staring in horror at the expensive-looking black truck, now sporting a sizable dent in its rear bumper, courtesy of her front end. For a moment, she sat frozen, hoping maybe, just maybe, no one had noticed. Then a door slammed somewhere nearby and heavy footsteps approached. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. Stella scrambled out of her car, already pulling out her phone. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see—" The man who rounded the truck stopped her mid-sentence. He was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders and dirt-stained work clothes that suggested he'd been doing manual labor. His jaw was set in a hard line, dark eyes narrowed as he assessed the damage. Mud streaked his forearms, and his work boots were caked with soil. "Are you serious right now?" His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the anger simmering beneath. "Look, I know this is bad," Stella said quickly, her fingers already opening her banking app. "I'll pay for the damage right now. I can transfer the money immediately. How much do you think you can just buy your way out of this?" He crossed his arms over his chest, and Stella couldn't help but notice the way his biceps flexed with the movement. "Not relevant," she told herself firmly. "I'm not trying to buy my way out of anything," she protested, frustration creeping into her voice. She was exhausted, lost, and now this. "I'm trying to fix the problem. Give me your information, and I'll handle it." He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "Of course you will. Big city girl rolls into town, destroys someone's property, and thinks a quick transfer will make it all go away." Stella's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by indignation. "Excuse me, you don't know anything about me." "I know enough." He walked around the truck, examining the damage more closely. The dent was significant, the paint scratched and the metal crumpled. "I know you can't drive worth a damn." Heat flooded Stella's cheeks. Yes, she'd made a mistake, but his attitude was completely uncalled for. "Look, whoever you are, I don't need your charity, lady." He straightened, fixing her with a cold stare that somehow made her feel both furious and oddly flustered. "Or your pity." "I'm not offering pity." Stella's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I'm offering to take responsibility for the accident." "Yeah?" He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of earth and something woodsy. "Well, I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question came out more desperate than she intended. His eyes swept over her, not inappropriately, but assessing, like she was a problem he was trying to solve. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression, something that wasn't quite anger. Then it was gone. "I want you to pay attention next time you decide to drive through town." He turned away, heading back toward wherever he'd come from. "Before you hurt someone." "Wait," Stella called after him. "At least give me your name, your insurance information." He didn't turn around. "Don't worry about it." "But the damage—" I said, "Don't worry about it." He disappeared around a corner, leaving Stella standing in the middle of the narrow street with a damaged car, a dented truck, and absolutely no idea what had just happened. She stood there for a long moment, her phone still clutched in her hand, her carefully planned apology dying on her lips. The man's words echoed in her mind. "I don't need your charity." What an absolute— She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. This was fine, everything was fine. She'd find out who he was and fix this properly, even if he was too proud or too angry to accept help right now. Stella got back in her car and carefully maneuvered around the truck, her hands still shaking slightly from the confrontation. As she finally spotted her aunt's bar at the end of the street, she couldn't shake the image of dark eyes and a clenched jaw. Welcome to small-town life, she thought bitterly. This was going to be a very long 2 weeks. The bar looked worse than Stella had imagined, and she'd imagined pretty bad. The wooden sign dangled from a single chain, the paint so faded that Cecilia's corner was barely legible. The windows needed washing, and one of the shutters hung at an angle that suggested it had given up on life. Stella pushed open the door, wincing as it creaked loud enough to wake the dead. "There she is!" Aunt Cecilia emerged from behind the bar, arms spread wide. She looked exactly as Stella remembered. Silver hair pulled into a messy bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and a smile that suggested she knew far more than she let on. "My beautiful niece. Come to save me from ruin. Aunt C." Stella accepted the enthusiastic hug, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and wine. "You look good." "I look old, but thank you for lying." Cecilia pulled back, studying Stella's face with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look exhausted." "And stressed, and—" she gasped dramatically. "Is that a dent on your car?" Stella groaned. "Don't ask." "Oh, I'm asking." Cecilia guided her to a bar stool, already pouring a generous glass of red wine. "Sit, drink. Tell Aunt C everything." The wine was actually decent, Stella noted with surprise. She took a long sip before recounting the disaster of her arrival, the narrow street, and the infuriating man with the truck. Cecilia listened with growing amusement, her lips twitching. When Stella finished, her aunt was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "What?" Stella demanded. "Why are you smiling like that?" "Oh, honey," Cecilia patted her hand. "You have no idea what you just did, do you?" A cold feeling settled in Stella's stomach. "What did I do?" "You," Cecilia said, barely containing her laughter, "just hit Owen Patterson's truck." The name meant nothing to Stella. "And Owen Patterson is only the owner of Patterson Vineyards, the biggest and most successful winery in the entire valley." Cecilia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Also, the richest man in town. Also, and this is the fun part, the man who's been trying to buy this property from me for the past 5 years. The wine glass nearly slipped from Stella's hand. "You're joking." "I never joke about wine or real estate, dear." Cecilia leaned against the bar, clearly enjoying herself. "Owen owns the land right next to us. He wants to expand his vineyard, and this prime corner location is the last piece of the puzzle. He's made me 3 different offers, each one more generous than the last." Stella's mind reeled. The man in the dirty work clothes, who she'd assumed was some farmhand, was actually— but he looked like a man who actually works his own land instead of sitting in an office. Cecilia raised an eyebrow. "Owen's not like those pretentious vintners who show up for photo ops. He's hands-on with everything, pruning, harvesting, barrel maintenance. That's why people respect him." "He was incredibly rude," Stella muttered. "He was probably having a bad day. And then a stranger drove into his truck." Cecilia's tone was mild, but Stella caught the gentle reproach. "I tried to pay him." "Oh, sweetie," Cecilia laughed. "Owen Patterson doesn't need your money. His vineyard produces some of the finest wines in the state. He could buy 10 new trucks without blinking." Stella buried her face in her hands. "This is a nightmare." "This is hilarious," Cecilia corrected. "And it gets better. Owen comes by here at least once a week, always with some excuse to check on the property. Last month he offered me double the market value." Stella looked up. "Why didn't you take it?" For the first time, Cecilia's cheerful expression faltered. She glanced around the shabby bar, the scratched wooden tables, the mismatched chairs, the decades-old photos on the walls. Because your uncle and I built this place from nothing. We poured our hearts into it. And I know it doesn't look like much now, but... She trailed off, her eyes suspiciously bright. Aunt C. Stella reached across the bar, squeezing her aunt's hand. We'll fix it. That's why I'm here. I know, honey. Cecilia shook her head, composing herself. I needed help. The regulars have been wonderful, but we need something more to compete with the fancy wine bars that keep opening up. We need to renovate, update the menu, maybe add some events. I just don't have the energy or the know-how anymore. Stella surveyed the space with fresh eyes. The bones were good, high ceilings, beautiful old wood, a certain charm beneath the neglect. It would take work, significant work, but it wasn't impossible. Okay, she said slowly. We'll need a contractor, an updated liquor license, a new menu. And wine, Cecilia interrupted. We need good wine, the kind that attracts the tourists who come for the vineyard tours. Right. Wine. Stella pulled out her phone, ready to start making lists. Where do we usually source from? Cecilia's smile turned slightly wicked. Well, that's the other fun part. Patterson Vineyards produces the best wines in the valley. And they're the only premium local supplier within reasonable delivery distance. Stella's stomach dropped. No. Oh, yes. There has to be another option. There are options, Cecilia agreed, but none as good. And if we're going to save this place, we can't serve mediocre wine. Stella thought about dark eyes and a clenched jaw, about the cold dismissal in his voice. I don't need your charity. The idea of having to ask him for anything made her want to crawl under the bar and hide. He'll say no, she said flatly. Probably, Cecilia agreed cheerfully, but you're a smart, determined woman. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're enjoying this way too much. I really am. Cecilia refilled Stella's wineglass. Welcome home, sweetie. This is going to be fun. Stella drained half the glass in one go. Through the window she could see the hills covered in vineyards, including the vast expanse that must belong to Owen Patterson. Somewhere out there, the man whose truck she'd demolished was probably still fuming about the encounter. The same man she now needed to somehow convince to supply wine to her aunt's struggling bar. The same man who'd looked at her with such intensity that she'd felt it in her bones. 2 weeks, she'd promised herself. Just 2 weeks to fix everything and get back to San Francisco. That timeline was starting to feel wildly optimistic. Owen Patterson had made many questionable decisions in his 37 years, but driving to Cecilia's corner might rank among the stupidest. He told himself he was going to finally get the woman's bank details so she could pay for his truck. That was the logical reason, the mature, responsible reason. The fact that he hadn't been able to stop thinking about furious green eyes and flushed cheeks for 3 days straight had nothing to do with it, nothing at all. He pulled into the small parking lot and sat for a moment studying the building. It looked even worse in daylight, peeling paint, sagging shutters, a roof that probably leaked during heavy rain. Cecilia had been letting the place fall apart for years, too stubborn to sell and too proud to ask for help. And now her niece was here to... What? Play at being a business owner for a few weeks before running back to whatever city she came from. Owen climbed out of his truck, the dented one because he was petty enough to make a point, and headed for the door. Inside, the bar smelled like old wood and wine. Not unpleasant, just tired. A few regulars sat at the tables, and Cecilia was behind the bar, polishing glasses that had probably been polished 100 times already. She looked up when he entered, and her face split into a grin that immediately put him on guard. Owen Patterson, she said warmly. What a lovely surprise. Cecilia. He nodded respectfully. Whatever his issues with the property situation, he'd always liked the older woman. I'm looking for my niece. Cecilia's eyes sparkled with barely contained amusement. She's in the back, taking inventory. I'll get her. Before Owen could protest, Cecilia disappeared through a doorway, calling out, Stella, you have a visitor. A moment later, she appeared. Owen had been prepared to see her again. What he hadn't been prepared for was the way his pulse kicked up when she emerged from the back room, looking adorably flustered with her hair pulled into a messy ponytail and a clipboard in her hands. She stopped dead when she saw him. Several emotions flickered across her face, surprise, embarrassment, and then something that looked suspiciously like anger. You, she said. Me, he agreed, crossing his arms and leaning against the doorframe with deliberate casualness. "Nice to see you too." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" "I came to discuss the small matter of my truck, the one you destroyed." "I didn't destroy it," she shot back. "I dented it. There's a difference." "Not to my insurance company." Stella set down her clipboard with more force than necessary and pulled out her phone. "Fine. Give me your banking details, and I'll transfer the money right now. How much do you want?" Owen had prepared for this, had the number ready, had even looked up the actual cost of repairs, which was substantial enough to be irritating but not devastating. Instead, he found himself saying, "I haven't gotten an estimate yet." "Then get one," she said impatiently. "I want this settled." Eager to make this go away, he pushed off the doorframe, taking a few steps into the bar. "Guilty conscience?" "I don't have a guilty conscience. I have a to-do list the size of Texas, and dealing with you isn't on it." Something about her irritation was deeply satisfying. Owen glanced around the bar, noting the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the general air of neglect. "Speaking of your to-do list, you planning to actually fix this place up or just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic?" Stella's face flushed pink. "Excuse me? I'm just saying it seems like a lot of effort for a place that's been hemorrhaging money for years." He kept his tone casual, but he could feel Cecilia's sharp gaze on him from across the room. "Might be easier to cut your losses, sell to someone who knows what they're doing." "Someone like you?" Stella stepped closer, and Owen caught a hint of her perfume, something floral and completely at odds with her current expression, which suggested she might actually hit him. "Let me guess. You came here hoping I'd convince my aunt to sell." "I came here about my truck," Owen said, which was technically true, mostly true. "The property thing is just friendly advice." "Friendly?" Stella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were incredibly rude to me when we met. You refused to let me pay for the damage, and now you show up here with friendly advice about how we should give up and sell to you. Does that about sum it up?" When she put it like that, he sounded like an ass, which was probably fair. "Look," Owen said, moderating his tone slightly, "I'm just being realistic. Running a bar takes experience, capital, and connections. Do you have any of those things?" "I have a degree in business administration, a decade of management experience, and more determination than you can possibly imagine." Stella crossed her arms, mirroring his earlier stance. "What I don't have is patience for arrogant vineyard owners who think they can bully people into selling. I'm not bullying anyone." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, that's exactly what this looks like." They were close now, close enough that Owen could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could see the way her chest rose and fell with each angry breath. She was furious, and he was fascinated. This was a problem. "You know what?" Stella turned away, grabbing a notepad from the bar. "Here, write down your banking details. I'll transfer $3,000 right now. That should cover the damage and then some." "I don't want your money." She spun back to face him. "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Owen's mind supplied several answers, none of which were appropriate, none of which he was ready to examine too closely. "I want you to think carefully about what you're doing here," he said finally. "This place is going to eat your time, your money, and your sanity. And at the end of it all, you'll still have a failing bar that nobody wants." "Except you apparently want it," Stella pointed out. "You want it so badly you've made 3 offers to buy it. That's business. That's different." "Is it?" She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Or do you just not like the idea that someone might actually succeed where you expected them to fail?" The observation hit closer to home than Owen wanted to admit. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. From behind the bar, Cecilia cleared her throat. "Owen, dear, are you staying for a drink, or did you get what you came for?" He should leave, should cut his losses and go back to the vineyard where he belonged. But something, pride, stubbornness, or that infuriating pull he felt toward the angry woman in front of him, made him linger. "I'll take a glass of whatever you're pouring," he heard himself say. Stella made a noise somewhere between a laugh and a growl. "Unbelievable." "What?" Owen settled onto a bar stool. "I'm being neighborly. You're being insufferable. That too." Cecilia poured him a generous glass of red, looking far too pleased with herself. Owen took a sip, watching Stella stomp back toward the storage room. "You're enjoying this," he said to Cecilia. "More than you can possibly imagine," she agreed cheerfully. Owen took another sip of wine and told himself this was fine. He'd proven his point. He'd ruffled her feathers. He was in so much trouble. Stella had been in the village for exactly 1 week, and Owen Patterson had appeared at the bar 5 times. 5 times. Each visit followed the same infuriating pattern. He'd show up during the afternoon lull, make some comment about coming to discuss the truck situation, then proceed to avoid giving her any actual information while offering unsolicited opinions about the bar's inevitable failure. On Tuesday, he'd suggested the ceiling fan looked dangerously unstable. On Thursday, he'd mentioned that the plumbing was probably original to the building, which can't be good. Yesterday, he'd walked in, looked around and said, "You know, I have a guy who does demolition. I could give you his number, for when you're ready to admit defeat." Stella had thrown a bar towel at his head. He'd caught it, smirked, and left without another word. Now it was Monday morning, and she was meeting with Lorena Vega, the architect her aunt had recommended. Please let this be normal, Stella thought, as a young woman with dark curly hair and an infectious smile walked through the door carrying an enormous portfolio. "You must be Stella." Lorena set down her bag and extended a hand. "Cecilia's told me so much about you. Also, the entire town is talking about you hitting Owen Patterson's truck, which is honestly the best gossip we've had in months." Stella's heart sank. The entire town. Small village, big scandal. Lorena grinned. "Don't worry. Most people think it's hilarious. Owen's a good guy, but he can be a bit intense. Some folks enjoy seeing him taken down a peg." "I didn't take him down a peg," Stella protested. "I accidentally hit his truck and tried to pay for it. He's the one who's been—" She stopped herself. "Never mind." Lorena's grin widened. "Oh, this is going to be fun. Now let me see what we're working with." For the next hour, Stella forgot about Owen Patterson entirely. Lorena was professional, creative, and refreshingly honest. She measured, sketched, pointed out structural issues Stella hadn't noticed, and gradually transformed the shabby space into something beautiful in Stella's mind. "The bones are fantastic," Lorena said, making notes in her tablet. "High ceilings, original hardwood under this awful carpet, beautiful natural light. We just need to strip away the decades of bad decisions and let the space breathe." "How much is this going to cost?" Stella asked, dreading the answer. Lorena named a figure that made Stella wince, but wasn't completely impossible. "That's assuming we do most of the cosmetic work ourselves, and hire contractors only for the structural and electrical stuff. I have a crew I trust. They're fast, affordable, and they don't cut corners." "When can we start?" "Next week, if you're ready." Lorena looked up from her tablet. "But there's something else you should think about. The wine list." Stella groaned. "I know. I've been avoiding it. You can't avoid it forever. This is wine country. People come here expecting quality local wines. And in this valley, that means Patterson Vineyards," Stella finished miserably. "I know." Lorena's expression turned sympathetic. "Look, I know Owen can be difficult, but his wines are genuinely exceptional. If you want to compete with the upscale wine bars, you need his labels. There's no way around it. He'll say no. He wants to buy this property. Why would he help me succeed? Maybe because beneath the grumpy exterior, he's actually a decent person," Lorena suggested. "I've known Owen since we were kids. He's stubborn and private, but he's not cruel. Try asking him, properly, without the defensive anger." Stella wanted to argue that she wasn't defensively angry, but Lorena raised an eyebrow that suggested she wasn't buying it. "Fine," Stella said. "I'll ask. But when he says no, I'm holding you personally responsible for the humiliation. Deal." Lorena started packing up her things. "Oh, and Stella, for what it's worth, I think you're going to do great things with this place. Owen thinks so too, whether he admits it or not." "What makes you say that?" "Because he keeps coming back." Lorena's smile turned knowing. "And it's definitely not about the truck." After Lorena left, Stella stood in the empty bar, looking at the space with new eyes. She could see it now, the vision Lorena had painted. Exposed brick, warm lighting, intimate seating areas, a showcase wall for premium wines. It could work. It could really work, if she could convince Owen Patterson to supply those premium wines. Stella pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. She didn't have his number, didn't have any way to contact him, except to literally show up at his vineyard and ask. The idea made her stomach twist with anxiety. The bell above the door chimed. Stella looked up and there he was, like she'd summoned him with her thoughts. Owen stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking annoyingly handsome in a flannel shirt and jeans. "Let me guess," Stella said, crossing her arms. "You came to tell me the foundation is crumbling." "Actually, I came to bring you this." He held up a piece of paper. "My banking information. For the truck." Stella stared at him, genuinely shocked. After a week of avoidance, he was finally giving her what she'd asked for from the beginning. She walked over and took the paper, studying it suspiciously. "What's the catch?" "No catch. There's always a catch with you." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something softer. "Maybe I just decided it was time to let you off the hook. Why now?" Owen shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because you've been asking for a week, and I've been—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Difficult. You've been impossible," Stella corrected. "That too." He glanced around the bar. "I saw Lorena leaving. You hired her." "I did. We're starting renovations next week. She's good. She did work on my tasting room last year." They stood there for a moment in awkward silence. This was it, Stella realized. This was her opening. Ask him about the wine. Be professional. Be calm. "Owen," she began, then stopped as the door opened again. A small boy with dark hair and enormous brown eyes ran in, heading straight for Owen. "Uncle Owen, I've been looking everywhere for you." Owen caught the child easily, ruffling his hair. "Nicholas, what did I tell you about running off?" "Not to do it," the boy said cheerfully, completely unrepentant. Then he noticed Stella, and his eyes went wide. "Wow. Are you Uncle Owen's girlfriend?" Stella choked on air. Owen's ears turned red. "No," they said in unison. Nicholas looked between them, clearly unconvinced. "Then why is Uncle Owen always talking about, how about we get you back home?" Owen interrupted hastily, practically lifting the boy off his feet. He looked at Stella, his expression somewhere between mortified and defiant. "I'll see you around." He fled, nephew in tow. Stella stood alone in the bar, holding Owen Patterson's banking information in one hand and trying very hard not to smile. Maybe Lorena was right. Maybe this was going to work after all. Owen had made a critical error in judgment, and that error was currently sitting at Cecilia's bar, eating chocolate chip cookies and chattering away to Stella Morrison like they were best friends. And then Uncle Owen said the grapes weren't ready, but I think they looked ready. They were purple and everything. Nicholas swung his legs from the bar stool, completely oblivious to the panic in Owen's chest as he rushed through the door. Stella looked up, and the smile she'd been giving his nephew transformed into something far more guarded. "Your uncle seems to have a habit of losing track of you." "I didn't lose track of him," Owen said, slightly out of breath from jogging 3 blocks. "He's 7. He has the escape skills of a trained operative." "I'm not escaping," Nicholas protested. "I'm visiting Miss Stella. She has better cookies than you." Traitor, Owen thought, but he couldn't really argue. His cookies came from a package. Stella's, apparently made fresh this morning, smelled incredible. "Nicholas," Owen said in his most authoritative uncle voice, "what did we talk about this morning?" "That I should stay in the vineyard office while you work." Nicholas took another bite of cookie. "But that was boring, and Miss Stella is nice. She showed me pictures of San Francisco." "Did you know there's a bridge that's golden but not actually made of gold?" "I did know that." Owen looked at Stella apologetically. "I'm sorry, he won't bother you again." "He's not bothering me," Stella said, and she seemed to mean it. Something in Owen's chest did an uncomfortable flip. "He's actually been helping me organize the new menu cards." She gestured to a stack of cards on the bar, each one carefully arranged by color. Nicholas beamed with pride. "See, Uncle Owen? I'm helping." "You're supposed to be helping me," Owen pointed out, but his heart wasn't in it. The truth was, watching Stella interact with his nephew, patient and warm in a way she'd never been with him, was doing strange things to his composure. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" "No, just—" He cleared his throat. "Thank you for not being annoyed." "Why would I be annoyed? He's a sweetheart." She handed Nicholas another cookie, which the boy accepted with enthusiasm. "Unlike certain vineyard owners I could mention." "I walked right into that one," Owen muttered. "You really did." There was a moment of almost comfortable silence, broken only by Nicholas's happy chewing. Then Stella straightened her shoulders, and Owen recognized the look on her face. She was about to ask him something she'd been working up the courage for. "Since you're here," she began, her tone carefully professional, I wanted to discuss a business proposition. Owen's guard went up immediately. What kind of proposition? The bar needs quality wines, local wines specifically. Patterson Vineyards produces the best in the region. She met his eyes steadily. I'd like to feature your wines on our menu. I'm prepared to pay premium prices and provide excellent placement. There it was. The ask he'd been expecting since she'd arrived. Owen should have felt vindicated. She needed him, needed his product. But instead he felt an uncomfortable twist in his gut. No, he said. Stella blinked. No? Just like that? Just like that? You didn't even think about it. I don't need to think about it. Owen crossed his arms, aware he was being unreasonable but unable to stop himself. I have distribution agreements with established restaurants and wine bars. I don't have the capacity for new accounts right now. It was technically true, it was also completely irrelevant. He could make an exception if he wanted to. Stella's jaw tightened. This isn't about capacity. This is about the property, isn't it? You still think I'm going to fail, so why help me succeed? I think you're in over your head, Owen said, his voice harder than he intended. And I think supplying you with wine would be throwing good business after bad. The color rose in her cheeks, anger sparking in those green eyes. That's not your decision to make. It literally is my decision. They're my wines. You're being petty. I'm being practical. You're being... She stopped, glancing at Nicholas, who was watching their argument with wide, fascinated eyes. She took a visible breath, moderating her tone. Fine. I'll source from elsewhere. Good luck with that, Owen said, immediately regretting the words but too stubborn to take them back. Oh, I don't need luck. Stella's smile was sharp enough to cut. I have determination. And unlike you, I actually care about making this work instead of watching it fail so I can swoop in and buy the property. That's not... Owen started, but she'd already turned away. Nicholas, honey, you can come visit any time, she said sweetly. Your uncle, however, is no longer welcome unless he's here to actually pay for his truck repairs, instead of just carrying that paper around like a security blanket. Owen's hand went to his pocket, where he'd been carrying the banking information for 3 days without sending it to her. How did she know? Come on, Nicholas, he held out his hand. Let's go. His nephew took his hand reluctantly, looking back at Stella with longing. But I didn't finish my cookie. You can finish it on the way. As they walked back toward the vineyard, Nicholas was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally he said, Uncle Owen? Yeah, buddy? Why were you mean to Miss Stella? She was just asking a question. Owen winced. Out of the mouths of babes. It's complicated, Nico. It didn't sound complicated. It sounded like you were being stubborn. The boy looked up at him with those earnest brown eyes. Mama says you're too stubborn for your own good. Your mama says a lot of things. She also says you're lonely. Nicholas swung their joined hands. I think Miss Stella is lonely too. Maybe you could be lonely together. Owen nearly tripped over his own feet. It doesn't work like that, Nico. Why not? Because she drives me crazy. You drive her crazy too, Nicholas pointed out with infuriating 7-year-old logic. But you both smile after. Like you enjoy it. Owen had no response to that, mostly because his nephew might be right, which was a terrifying thought. Back at the vineyard, Owen tried to focus on work, checking the fermentation tanks, reviewing the harvest schedule, anything to keep his mind occupied. It didn't help. His thoughts kept drifting back to the bar, to Stella's anger, to the way she'd been so gentle with Nicholas. His production manager, Marcus, found him staring blankly at a perfectly good barrel of Cabernet. Boss, Marcus said carefully, you've been looking at that same barrel for 15 minutes. Either it's the best wine we've ever made, or something else is on your mind. It's nothing, Owen said. Does this nothing have green eyes and a tendency to hit parked trucks? Owen shot him a look. You too? Marcus grinned. Small town, big gossip. Also, you've been weird for 2 weeks, distracted, snappy. And you've gone to that bar 5 times in the last week. Who's counting? Everyone, apparently. Marcus leaned against the barrel. So what's the deal? You like her, she likes you, you're both too stubborn to admit it? I don't like her, Owen protested. She's infuriating. Uh-huh. And that's why you carry her banking information around like a love letter? Owen pulled the paper from his pocket and stared at it. When had this become a habit? She asked for my account details. I gave them to her. 2 weeks ago. You gave them to her 2 weeks ago and she still hasn't sent the money because you still haven't sent her yours. Marcus shook his head. You're playing a game, Owen. Question is, do you even know what game it is? Owen crumpled the paper in his fist. She asked me to supply wine to the bar. And you said no. And I said no. Why? Because... Owen stopped, realizing he didn't have a good answer. Because it's complicated. Everything's complicated with you, Marcus said, not unkindly. Maybe it's time to try simple. She needs wine. You make wine. Seems pretty straightforward. After Marcus left, Owen stood alone in the barrel room, surrounded by aging wine and his own stupidity. He thought about Stella's face when he'd refused her, the flash of hurt before the anger kicked in. He thought about Nicholas's words, "You both smile after," and he thought about the fact that he'd genuinely enjoyed every single argument, every heated exchange, every moment of sparring with her. This was a problem, a big problem, and Owen had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Stella was beginning to suspect that Nicholas Patterson had a better social life than she did. The 7-year-old had escaped to the bar 4 times in the past week, each time with a different excuse. He needed help with his homework, doubtful since it was summer. He wanted to learn about business management, adorable but unlikely. He was conducting a cookie quality survey. This one might actually be true. The real reason, Stella suspected, was that Nicholas had decided she needed a friend, and he'd appointed himself to the position. Today he'd shown up with a drawing of the bar, complete with stick figures of Stella, Aunt Cecilia, and, somewhat concerning, Owen standing next to Stella, with hearts floating above their heads. "That's very creative, Nico," Stella said diplomatically, not addressing the heart situation. "But doesn't your uncle wonder where you are? He knows I'm here." Nicholas was coloring in the hearts with a red crayon. "He always knows. He just pretends to be surprised when he comes to get me." Stella paused in the middle of wiping down the bar. "What do you mean, pretends?" "I mean, he tracks me on his phone." Nicholas said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. "Mama made him put an app on my watch after I got lost at the farmer's market, so he knows exactly where I am. He just likes having an excuse to come see you." The cloth slipped from Stella's hand. "That's not... he doesn't..." The door opened, and Owen walked in looking harried and annoyed, which Stella was starting to recognize as his default expression when dealing with his nephew's escape artist tendencies. "Nicholas Eduardo Patterson," Owen said, using what was clearly the full name means trouble voice. "What did we agree about after yesterday?" "That I would tell you before leaving the vineyard," Nicholas recited dutifully. "But Uncle Owen, I did tell you. I said I'm going to visit Miss Stella, and you said because you were looking at your phone." Owen's jaw clenched. "That doesn't count." "Why not? You heard me." "Because I was distracted." "By what?" Nicholas asked innocently. Too innocently. "Were you looking at Miss Stella's website again? The one with all the videos about fixing up the bar?" Stella's head snapped up. "You were what?" Owen's ears turned red, and Stella felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost concerning. "I was not. I glanced at it once, research purposes." "He watches them a lot," Nicholas announced cheerfully, apparently determined to destroy his uncle's dignity. "He watched the one about choosing paint colors 3 times. And he always pauses on the parts where you're talking." "Nicholas," Owen said through gritted teeth, "we're going to have a conversation about discretion." "What's discretion?" "It's the thing you don't have." Stella was trying very hard not to smile. She was failing spectacularly. "So you've been keeping tabs on the competition?" "It's not like that," Owen said. "Then what is it like?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, finally settled on, "I'm going to wait outside. Nicholas, you have 2 minutes to say goodbye." He fled like a man escaping a burning building. Stella looked at Nicholas, who was grinning like he'd just won a prize. "You did that on purpose." "Maybe a little." He didn't look remotely sorry. "Uncle Owen talks about you all the time. He tries not to, but I hear him on the phone with my mama." "What does he say?" Stella asked before she could stop herself. Nicholas leaned in conspiratorially. "He said you're really pretty, but also really irritating, and that you make him want to pull his hair out, and also..." He scrunched up his face, trying to remember. "Oh, he said you're the most stubborn woman he's ever met, and he can't figure out if that's the worst thing or the best thing about you." Stella's heart did something complicated in her chest. "He said all that?" "Yep. And then Mama laughed and said he was a goner, whatever that means." "Do you know what that means?" Stella cleared her throat. It means your mama thinks your uncle likes me. Do you like him back? It was such a simple question, a child's question. And Stella found she didn't have a simple answer. Did she like Owen Paterson, the man who'd been nothing but difficult since the moment they met, who'd refused to help her business, who showed up just to provoke her, who apparently couldn't give her his banking information without turning it into some kind of psychological warfare? The same man who came running every time his nephew escaped, who watched her videos about the bar renovation, who looked at her sometimes like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. It's complicated, sweetie, Stella said finally. That's what Uncle Owen says too. Nicholas hopped off the bar stool. Adults make everything complicated. It's weird. Out of the mouths of babes indeed. After Nicholas left, with Owen studiously avoiding eye contact, Stella's phone rang. The screen showed her best friend's name, Rachel. Tell me you're surviving in small-town USA, Rachel said without preamble. Define surviving. Oh no, that bad. Stella filled her in on the past 2 weeks, the renovation progress, the wine supply problem, and because Rachel would drag it out of her eventually, the Owen situation. Rachel listened with the kind of focused attention that meant she was already forming opinions. So let me get this straight. This hot, grumpy vineyard owner keeps showing up at your bar, argues with you constantly, refuses to help your business, but also watches your videos multiple times and uses his nephew as an excuse to see you. That's a very biased summary. Is it inaccurate? No, Stella admitted. Girl. Rachel's voice took on that tone, the one that meant she was about to say something Stella didn't want to hear. He's into you. He's not into me. He's into annoying me. Same thing for some guys. The question is, are you into him? Stella stopped, staring at her reflection in the bar mirror. Was she? He drives me insane, Rach. That's not an answer. He won't help the bar. He basically admitted he wants me to fail. And yet, he keeps coming back. Rachel paused. Look, I'm not saying you should marry the guy. I'm just saying there's clearly something there, and life's too short to ignore chemistry. There's no chemistry. Uh-huh. Is that why you're blushing right now? You can't even see me. I don't need to. I can hear it in your voice. Rachel laughed. Okay, executive decision time. I'm coming to visit next weekend. I need to see this disaster in person. It's not a disaster. Stella, you're in a small town, renovating a bar, fighting with a hot vineyard owner who may or may not be obsessed with you, and being used as a relationship counselor by a 7-year-old. This is either a disaster or a romantic comedy, and I'm betting on both. After they hung up, Stella stood alone in the bar, surrounded by paint swatches and renovation plans, thinking about Owen Paterson and his red ears, and the fact that he'd called her pretty. Pretty but irritating. She should probably be offended by the irritating part. Instead, she was smiling. That evening, Owen sat on his porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the vineyard, and trying not to think about the disaster that had been this afternoon. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Maria. Nicholas says you're making sad faces at your grapes again. What happened? Owen typed back, your son has a big mouth. He gets it from his mother. Now tell me what happened. Nothing happened. Everything's fine. Owen. He sighed and called her, because texting wasn't going to cut it. Your son, he said when Maria answered, is determined to humiliate me. What did he do now? Maria sounded far too amused. He told Stella about... Owen stopped, realizing he didn't want to finish that sentence. About you watching her videos, Maria supplied helpfully. Yeah, he mentioned that to me too, 3 times apparently. That's dedication, hermano. It was research. Sure it was. He could hear the smile in her voice. So when are you going to ask her out properly instead of using my son as a buffer? I'm not using Nico as a buffer. You're absolutely using Nico as a buffer. You show up, argue with her, leave before things get too real, rinse and repeat. It's like watching a teenage boy try to flirt. I'm 37 years old. Then act like it. You like her. She probably likes you despite your best efforts to be insufferable. Stop playing games and just... She asked me for wine, Owen interrupted. For the bar, I said no. There was a long silence, then, Dios mío, Owen, why? Because... He ran a hand through his hair. Because I don't know what I'm doing, Murray. I don't know how to do this. Feel this way. About someone. Again. The words came out quieter than he intended. It's been 5 years since Elena, Maria finished gently. I know, but Owen, you can't let one bad relationship keep you locked up forever. And from what Nico tells me, Stella's nothing like Elena. She's leaving, Owen said. Soon as she fixes up the bar, she'll go back to San Francisco. That's the whole plan. Are you sure about that? She told Cecilia 2 weeks, maximum. That was before, Maria pointed out. Before the renovation. Before Nicholas adopted her. Before you started showing up every other day to argue with her. Owen didn't have a response to that. Just think about it, his sister said. And maybe consider actually helping her instead of sabotaging her. Who knows? Maybe she'll surprise you. After they hung up, Owen sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about green eyes and sharp tongues, and the way Stella had smiled at his nephew. Maybe Maria was right. Maybe it was time to stop playing games. Rachel arrived like a whirlwind, stepping out of her rental car wearing designer sunglasses and a grin that spelled trouble. "Oh my God," she said, looking around the village square. "This place is adorable. Like aggressively adorable. I feel like I walked onto a movie set." Stella hugged her best friend, relief washing over her. "You have no idea how much I needed you here. I brought wine, chocolate, and the ability to tell you when you're being an idiot." Rachel grabbed her bag from the trunk. "So where's this bar that's taking over your life?" An hour later, Rachel was sitting at the bar with Aunt Cecilia, both of them drinking wine and watching Stella organize liquor bottles with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. "She's been like this for 3 days, Cecilia said. "Ever since the Patterson boy stopped coming by." Rachel's eyes lit up. "The hot, grumpy one? He stopped coming?" 5 days without a single visit, Cecilia confirmed. "It's very unlike him." "I don't care if he comes or not," Stella called from across the bar, not turning around. "I'm busy." "She's reorganized those bottles 4 times today," Cecilia whispered loudly. "Interesting." Rachel took a sip of wine. "And how does she react when you mention him?" "Like that." Cecilia gestured to Stella, who was now aggressively polishing a wine glass. "Defensive. Fidgety. Yesterday she cleaned the same table 3 times after I casually mentioned seeing his truck drive past. You two know I can hear you, right?" Stella set down the glass with more force than necessary. "We're counting on it, honey." Cecilia smiled sweetly. The door opened and a woman walked in. Elegant, perfectly styled, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she looked good. She surveyed the bar with a critical eye before her gaze landed on Stella. "You must be Cecilia's niece," the woman said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm Vanessa. I own the boutique across the square." Stella. She shook Vanessa's hand, trying to place why the name sounded familiar. "I thought I'd stop by and welcome you to town." Vanessa's tone was friendly, but something felt off. "I heard you're doing renovations. How brave of you." "Brave," Stella repeated. "Well, it's such a challenging location. And the competition from the established wine bars is fierce." Vanessa's smile widened. "I'm sure Owen told you all about it. He's so knowledgeable about the wine business." There it was. The reason for the visit. "Owen and I don't really talk about business." "Don't you?" Vanessa tilted her head. "That's surprising. He usually loves discussing the industry. Of course, that was back when we were together. Old habits, I suppose." Rachel choked on her wine. Cecilia suddenly became very interested in her glass. "You and Owen dated?" Stella asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "For 2 years. It ended amicably, of course." Vanessa examined her manicured nails. "Though I do wonder sometimes if we gave up too easily. We had such chemistry." "Fascinating," Stella said flatly. "Anyway, I should let you get back to work. Just wanted to say hello." Vanessa headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Stella, a word of advice. Owen can be intense. Make sure you know what you're getting into." After she left, silence filled the bar for exactly 3 seconds before Rachel exploded. "That was the ex-girlfriend?" She looked between Stella and Cecilia. "Please tell me that was the ex-girlfriend, because that was the most passive-aggressive welcome wagon I've ever witnessed." "That was her," Cecilia confirmed. "Vanessa Clark. She and Owen dated a few years ago. She's never quite accepted that he ended things." "He ended it?" Stella asked before she could stop herself. Cecilia's smile turned knowing. "Very definitively. Vanessa wanted him to sell the vineyard and move to the city with her. Owen chose his land. She's been dropping hints about reconciliation ever since." "Well, she seems delightful," Rachel said dryly. She turned to Stella. And you're totally not bothered by the fact that Owen's gorgeous ex just waltzed in here marking her territory. I'm not bothered. Your eye is twitching. It's not... Stella touched her face. It's allergies. Uh-huh. Rachel exchanged a look with Cecilia. Cecilia, how do you feel about making a small wager? I'm listening. No, Stella said firmly. Whatever you're planning, no. I bet you $20 that these two kiss within the next 2 weeks, Rachel announced. Cecilia laughed. Make it 30 and I say 10 days. Are you both insane? Stella demanded. Owen and I are not going to kiss. We barely tolerate each other. Exactly, Rachel said. That's the whole point. The tension is unbearable. Someone needs to do something about it. There's no tension. Stella, honey, Cecilia said gently. There's so much tension that Marcus from the vineyard asked me if Owen was okay, because apparently he's been brooding more than usual. His words, not mine. Stella wanted to argue, but the image of Owen brooding was unfortunately compelling. That doesn't mean anything. It means you're both stubborn idiots dancing around something obvious, Rachel said cheerfully. Which is where I come in. Consider me your fairy godmother. I don't need a fairy godmother. Every romantic heroine needs a fairy godmother. It's like a rule. Rachel pulled out her phone. Now, does this town have any events coming up? Festivals? Wine tastings? Anywhere we might accidentally on purpose run into a certain grumpy vintner. The wine festival is in 2 weeks, Cecilia offered helpfully. Owen's vineyard is always featured prominently. Perfect. Rachel typed something into her phone. Stella, how do you feel about needing emergency help taste-testing wines at Owen's vineyard tomorrow? I feel like that's a terrible idea. Which is exactly why we're doing it. Rachel grinned. Trust me, I've read enough romance novels to know how this works. You two need a catalyst. This isn't a romance novel. Not yet, Rachel said. But give it time. Owen was reviewing harvest schedules when Marcus appeared in his office doorway looking amused. Boss, you have visitors. Tell them I'm busy. It's Stella Morrison and a friend. Owen's head snapped up so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. What? Stella, Marcus repeated slowly, grinning. Morrison. She's here with another woman. Says she needs to discuss wine selection for the bar. Owen's heart rate kicked up. 5 days. He'd stayed away for 5 days trying to get his head straight, and now she was here. At his vineyard. Send them in. Actually, they're in the tasting room. Thought you might want to meet them there. Owen stood, straightened his shirt, then realized what he was doing and forced himself to stop. This was professional. Business. He could handle this. He walked into the tasting room and immediately knew he was in trouble. Stella stood by the window, sunlight catching in her hair, and something in his chest constricted. Next to her was a woman with dark hair and an expression that suggested she knew exactly what was happening and was deeply entertained by it. Stella, Owen said, proud that his voice came out steady. Owen. She turned, and he couldn't read her expression. This is my friend Rachel. She's visiting from San Francisco. Pleasure to meet you, Rachel said, extending her hand with a smile that was a little too knowing for Owen's comfort. Stella's told me so much about you. Has she? Owen glanced at Stella, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Oh, yes. All about the truck incident, the renovation advice, the... Rachel? Stella interrupted desperately. Maybe we should talk about wine. Owen bit back a smile. Right. Wine. What can I help you with? And as Stella launched into a nervous explanation about needing to understand local wine profiles, Owen realized that 5 days of staying away had accomplished exactly nothing. He was still completely gone for her. The wine tasting was going surprisingly well, which meant Rachel was definitely planning something. Owen had started by showing them the vineyard itself, rows of vines heavy with clusters of grapes, the soil rich and dark beneath their feet. Stella had asked intelligent questions about growing conditions and harvest timing, while Rachel had mostly stayed quiet, watching them both with unnerving intensity. Now they were back in the tasting room, and Owen was pouring samples of his best wines. He tried to focus on the technical aspects, tannin structure, aging potential, food pairings, but he kept getting distracted by the way Stella closed her eyes when she tasted something she liked. This is incredible, Stella said, holding up a glass of Cabernet. The depth of flavor is amazing. It's from a particularly good harvest year, Owen explained, moving closer to point out the color. See how the light catches it? That deep ruby suggests proper aging. They were standing close now, both leaning over the same glass. Owen could smell her perfume again, something floral that seemed designed to drive him insane. "So educational," Rachel murmured from across the room. They both jumped apart like teenagers caught by a chaperone. "Right," Owen cleared his throat. "So about supplying the bar—" "I thought you said no," Stella interrupted, confusion and hope warring in her expression. Owen had been thinking about this for 5 days, about Maria's words, about Nicholas's innocent observation, about the fact that he'd been using business as an excuse to protect himself from something that terrified him. "I'm reconsidering," he said carefully. "If you're serious about making the bar work." "I'm absolutely serious." "Then we should negotiate terms." He pulled out his phone, trying to shift back into business mode. "I can offer you a selection of our mid-range labels at standard wholesale pricing." "Mid-range?" Stella's eyes narrowed. "I thought the point was to feature quality wines." "The mid-range wines are quality, but not your best. My best wines go to established accounts. Restaurants that have proven track records. In other words, you still don't trust that I'll succeed." The hurt in her voice was subtle, but Owen caught it. "That's not what I'm saying." "Isn't it?" Stella set down her glass. "You know what? Forget it. I'll find another supplier." "There is no other supplier, not at this level." "Then I'll make do with what I can get." She grabbed her bag. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Patterson. It's been very enlightening." She was halfway to the door when Owen's frustration finally boiled over. "Why do you have to be so stubborn?" Stella spun around. "Me? I'm stubborn. You're the one who's been playing games since we met." "I haven't been playing games." "Really? The truck payment you still haven't sent or accepted? Showing up at my bar every other day with excuses, watching my videos?" "One time," Owen protested. "I watched them one time." "3 times," Rachel called helpfully. "How according to your nephew?" Owen shot her a look that should have incinerated her on the spot. She smiled back innocently. "Look," he said, turning back to Stella, "maybe I haven't handled this perfectly, but you can't just walk in here, demand my premium wines, and get angry when I try to establish proper business boundaries." "I'm not demanding anything. I asked. You said no. End of story." "That's not—" Owen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Why does every conversation with you turn into an argument? Maybe because you're argumentative. I'm argumentative. You literally hit my truck and somehow made it my fault. I tried to pay you. I didn't want your money." "Then what did you want?" Stella demanded, her voice rising. The question hung in the air between them. Owen's mind went blank, then filled with about a dozen answers he absolutely could not say out loud. Not here. Not with Rachel watching like this was her personal entertainment. "I wanted—" He started, then stopped. What could he say? "I wanted an excuse to keep seeing you. I wanted to figure out why you drive me crazy in the best and worst ways possible. I wanted to stop thinking about you for 5 minutes." The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "This was a mistake," Stella said finally, her voice quieter now. "Come on, Rachel." "We're leaving." Owen watched her go, every instinct screaming at him to say something, do something, fix this. But the words wouldn't come. After they left, Marcus appeared from wherever he'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. "That went well," he said dryly. "Shut up. Very professional. Excellent negotiation tactics." "Marcus, I swear." "Boss, can I give you some advice?" Owen slumped against the tasting counter. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." Marcus poured himself a small glass of wine. "Stop treating her like a business proposition. Stop protecting yourself. And for the love of all that's holy, stop pretending this is about wine supply or property boundaries or anything other than the fact that you're terrified." "I'm not terrified. You've been alone for 5 years. You threw yourself into this vineyard after Elena left, and you've been using it as a shield ever since. Now here's this woman who makes you feel things you didn't think you could feel anymore, and you're sabotaging it before it can even start." Owen stared at his production manager. "When did you become a therapist?" "When you started acting like an idiot." Marcus set down his glass. "She's not Elena. She's not going to demand you give up everything you've built. But you have to actually give her a chance to prove that." After Marcus left, Owen stood alone in the tasting room, surrounded by bottles that represented years of his life's work, his refuge, his purpose. And suddenly, it all felt hollow. Back at the bar, Rachel was pacing while Stella aggressively scrubbed already clean tables. "Okay, that was intense," Rachel said. "I don't want to talk about it. You two were basically screaming, 'I have feelings for you, but I'm too scared to admit it at each other for 10 minutes straight.' We were arguing about wine. You were not arguing about wine. Rachel grabbed the cloth from Stella's hand. You were arguing about trust and fear and whatever baggage you're both carrying around. Stella sank onto a bar stool. He offered me mid-range wines, Rach. After all that, he still doesn't believe in what I'm doing here. Or, Rachel said gently, he's protecting himself, keeping distance. Because he knows if he fully commits to helping you, he's admitting this is more than just business. That's ridiculous. Is it? Rachel sat next to her. Stella, I've known you for 10 years. I've never seen you this worked up over a guy, ever. That's because he's infuriating. Or because you actually care what he thinks. Which terrifies you? Stella wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because Rachel was right. Somewhere between the truck accident and the arguments and the stubborn pride, Owen Patterson had gotten under her skin, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. Stella had driven to the vineyard against her better judgment, clutching a revised proposal for wine selection. 3 days had passed since the disastrous tasting, and pride be damned, she needed those wines. The bar's grand reopening was 3 weeks away, and she refused to serve mediocre bottles just because Owen Patterson was being difficult. She found him in the fermentation room, checking temperature gauges with Marcus. I need 10 minutes, she announced, without preamble. Owen looked up, surprise flickering across his face before his usual guarded expression slid into place. I'm working. 10 minutes, then I'll leave you alone forever if that's what you want. Something in her tone must have gotten through, because he nodded to Marcus, who left with a knowing look that made Stella want to throw something at him. Talk, Owen said. Stella pulled out her proposal, laying it on the stainless steel counter between them. I've revised my offer. I'll take whatever selection you're willing to provide, mid-range, entry-level, whatever. I'll pay 20% above your standard wholesale rate, and I'll feature Patterson Vineyards prominently in all marketing materials. Owen picked up the proposal, scanning it. This is too much. It's fair compensation for quality product. It's you overpaying because you think I need convincing. Maybe I do think that. Stella's frustration bubbled over. Maybe I'm tired of fighting you on everything. Maybe I just want to run my bar without you constantly. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to make them both jump. The lights flickered. Owen glanced toward the window, frowning. When did that get so dark? As if in answer, rain began pelting the glass in sheets. Damn, Owen muttered, pulling out his phone. His frown deepened. Flash flood warning. The road to town floods in heavy rain. How long until it passes? Could be hours. He typed something into his phone. You might be stuck here for a while. Stella's stomach dropped, stuck, at Owen's vineyard. For hours. This was fine. Everything was fine. The lights flickered again and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the grey stormlight from the windows. Perfect, Stella muttered. There's a generator, Owen said, but it only powers essential equipment. We'll have to wait this out in the tasting room. There's a fireplace. 20 minutes later, they sat in the tasting room, a fire crackling in the hearth. Owen had produced candles and, ironically, wine. For warmth, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Right. Warmth. The silence stretched, broken only by rain against the windows and the pop of burning wood. Stella sipped her wine and tried not to notice how the firelight softened Owen's features, how his shoulders had lost some of their tension. I'm sorry, Owen said suddenly. Stella nearly dropped her glass. What? For being difficult. About the wine supply. About everything. He stared into his glass like it held answers. You were right. I haven't been fair to you. Oh. Stella didn't know what to do with this version of Owen. Vulnerable. Honest. Why not? He was quiet for a long moment. Because it's easier to push you away than to admit that you scare me. Her heart stuttered. I scare you? Terrify me, actually. He looked up and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. I had a plan, you know. Focus on the vineyard. Build something solid. Don't let anyone close enough to... He stopped, shaking his head. Close enough to what? To make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need anymore. The air between them felt charged, electric. Stella set down her wine glass with shaking hands. What things? Owen stood, moving to add wood to the fire, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Partnership. Connection. Someone who challenges me and drives me crazy and makes me laugh all at once. Owen, I know you're leaving, he continued, his back still to her. Soon as the bar is running smoothly, back to San Francisco, back to your real life. And I know I have no right to ask you to stay or to feel anything or to... Stella stood, crossing to him before she could second-guess herself. What if I don't want to go back? He turned, eyes wide. What? I've been thinking about it. About staying. The bar. This place. It's starting to feel like... She didn't finish the sentence because Owen stepped closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Like what? His voice was rough. Like home, she whispered. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along her jaw. Stella's breath caught. This was happening. This was actually happening. She leaned in, rising on her toes, her eyes already starting to close. Owen stepped back. Stella's eyes flew open in confusion. Owen was looking at her with an expression somewhere between longing and amusement. You were trying to kiss me, he said. Heat flooded Stella's face. Embarrassment, anger, and frustration all warring for dominance. I was not. Yes, I was, obviously. Why did you stop? Because when we kiss, I don't want it to be because we're stuck in a storm. I don't want it to be convenient or impulsive. His eyes held hers. I want it to be because we both know exactly what it means. Stella stared at him, torn between admiration for his restraint and the overwhelming urge to throw her wine at him. You're unbelievable. I've been told. No, I mean... She grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and hurled it at his head. He caught it, naturally. You can't just say all that and then pull away. I just did. Owen Patterson, you are the most infuriating... I know. Stop smiling. Can't help it. You're cute when you're angry. Stella made a noise of pure frustration and stalked to the couch, throwing herself down. I'm sleeping here, don't talk to me. It's only 8 o'clock. I don't care. I'm done with you for the night. She could hear the smile in his voice. Okay, Stella. And stop saying my name like that. Like what? Like... Never mind. Just stop. Owen settled into the armchair across from her, looking far too pleased with himself. Stella grabbed another pillow and buried her face in it, trying to ignore the fact that despite everything, despite the embarrassment and frustration, she was smiling too. Stella woke to sunlight streaming through windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The storm, the conversation, the almost kiss that Owen had stopped with the most infuriating reasoning she'd ever heard. She sat up, finding Owen in the kitchenette area, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked unfairly good for someone who'd slept in an armchair all night. Morning, he said, handing her a mug. Roads should be clear now. Great. Stella took the coffee, avoiding his eyes. The vulnerability of last night felt too raw in the morning light. About last night. Don't. Stella stood, setting down the barely touched coffee. Let's just forget it happened, okay? Something flickered in Owen's expression. If that's what you want. It is. It absolutely wasn't. But pride was a powerful thing. The drive back to town was silent and awkward. When Owen dropped her at the bar, he hesitated before she got out. Stella, I'll send you the final wine order by email, she said, cutting him off. Professional, clean. That's what you wanted, right? She didn't wait for an answer. Inside the bar, Rachel took one look at her face and poured a glass of wine, despite it being 10 in the morning. That bad. Worse. Stella collapsed onto a bar stool and told her everything. Rachel listened, her expression cycling through disbelief, amusement, and finally exasperation. Let me get this straight. He basically confessed his feelings. You almost kissed, and he stopped it because he wants it to mean something. Yes. And you're mad about this? Yes. Because... Stella groaned. Because I'm terrified, Rach. What if I stay and it doesn't work out? What if the bar fails? What if he realizes I'm not worth all this complicated emotional whatever we're doing? Or, Rachel said gently, what if it works? What if you're both just scared of the same thing? Before Stella could answer, Aunt Cecilia burst through the door, phone in hand and grinning. Have you seen it? She demanded. Seen what? Cecilia pulled up Stella's channel on her phone, the one documenting the bar's renovation. Your latest video has over 10,000 views. People love the renovation content. Stella's eyes widened. 10,000? But I only posted it yesterday. Look at the comments, Cecilia urged, scrolling. People think it's charming. They're saying they want to visit when we open. And look, someone even commented about the grumpy hot guy in the background. Stella's stomach dropped. What? She grabbed the phone, scrolling through the video. There, at timestamp 3:47, Owen walking past in the background, scowling at something off camera. At 5:12, him talking to Nicholas near the doorway. At 8:30, him standing just visible through the window, watching her work. "Oh no," Stella whispered. "Oh yes," Rachel said, looking over her shoulder. "That's like 7 different shots of him. Has he seen this?" As if summoned, the door opened. Owen walked in, phone in hand, face stormy. "You put me in your videos." His voice was dangerously quiet. "I didn't know you were in them. You just kept showing up. So you used me for content?" "That's not... I didn't..." Stella fumbled for words. "I was documenting the renovation. You happened to be around. I happened to be around because Nicholas kept escaping to see you. That's not my fault." Owen ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell for frustration. "Do you have any idea how many people have already called me about this? My ex-girlfriend sent me the link with a very pointed message. The local news wants to do a story about the mystery man in the renovation videos." "I'll take them down," Stella said immediately. "Don't." She blinked. "What?" "Don't take them down." Owen's jaw clenched. "Just warn me next time before I become viral content." He left before she could respond. Cecilia and Rachel stared at Stella, who stared at the door. "Did he just say not to take them down?" Rachel asked slowly. "I think so. But he was angry. Very angry. Yet he doesn't want them removed." Cecilia's smile was knowing. "Interesting." Later that evening, Marcus appeared at the bar, looking amused. "Just thought you should know," he said, accepting the beer Stella offered. "Owen's watched those videos about 4 times today." Stella nearly dropped the glass she was holding. "What?" "Yep. Claims he's checking to see what other embarrassing footage you caught. But I caught him smiling at the one where you're laughing at something Nicholas said." After Marcus left, Stella pulled up the videos on her phone, watching them with new eyes. Owen in the background, always watching, always there. And despite his anger, he didn't want them taken down. "He's impossible," she muttered. "He's in love with you," Rachel corrected, appearing at her shoulder. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Rachel pulled up the wine festival flyer that had been posted in the window. "Because in 2 weeks, you're both going to be at this thing, competing in different categories, and everyone in town is going to be watching to see what happens next." Stella looked at the flyer, Patterson Vineyards listed as a featured exhibitor, Cecilia's Corner Bar as a nominee for Best New Establishment. "This is going to be a disaster," she said. "Or," Cecilia said, joining them with a bottle of wine, "it's going to be exactly what you both need." Stella wanted to argue, but she couldn't shake the image of Owen in those videos, always in the background, always watching, always there, even when he was trying to stay away. Maybe Cecilia was right. Maybe they both needed to stop running from whatever this was. The wine festival transformed the village square into something magical. Strings of lights overhead, vendor booths showcasing local products, and the air thick with the scent of wine and possibility. Stella stood behind the bar's booth, watching the crowd. Cecilia's Corner had been nominated for Best New Establishment, and despite her nerves, the bar looked perfect. Lorena had outdone herself with the renovations, and the new menu was attracting genuine interest. "Stop fidgeting," Rachel whispered. "You look amazing." Stella smoothed down her dress, a deep emerald green that Rachel had insisted she wear. "I'm not fidgeting. You've adjusted that wine bottle display 3 times in 5 minutes." Before Stella could respond, a ripple went through the crowd. She looked up and felt her stomach drop. Owen had arrived, and he wasn't alone. Vanessa was attached to his arm like a particularly elegant barnacle, laughing at something he'd said, her hand possessively on his bicep. Owen looked uncomfortable, but didn't pull away. "Deep breaths," Rachel murmured. "Don't let her see it bothers you." "It doesn't bother me." "Your eye is twitching again." Stella grabbed a glass of wine, her second of the evening, and took a longer sip than was probably wise. She absolutely was not watching Owen navigate through the crowd with Vanessa still clinging to him. She absolutely was not noticing how his eyes scanned the booths like he was looking for someone. She turned away deliberately, focusing on a customer, asking about their wine selection. 20 minutes later, Stella felt rather than saw Owen approach. She kept her attention on arranging glasses, her movements perhaps more forceful than necessary. "Stella," he said quietly. She looked up, proud of how steady her voice was. "Owen, Vanessa enjoying the festival?" Vanessa's smile was sharp. "Oh, We're having a wonderful time. Owen's been telling me all about the vineyard's latest awards. How nice, Stella said flatly. Owen's jaw tightened. Vanessa, could you excuse us for a moment? Of course. Vanessa drifted away, but not before giving Stella a triumphant look. She's not... Owen started. It's none of my business, Stella interrupted, pouring another glass of wine. Stella, shouldn't you get back to your date? She's not my date. She just showed up and... He stopped, studying her face. Are you jealous? Absolutely not. You are. For the first time since arriving, Owen's expression softened. You're jealous. I'm busy. The awards ceremony starts soon. Owen didn't leave. Instead, he stationed himself near the bar's booth, close enough that Stella could feel his presence but far enough to not be obvious. Vanessa tried to reclaim his attention twice, but he remained unmoved, his eyes frequently finding Stella in the crowd. When the ceremony began, Stella's heart pounded. The announcer worked through various categories: Best Dessert Wine, Best Tasting Room Experience, Best Local Producer, which went to Patterson Vineyards naturally. Finally, and for Best New Establishment, Cecilia's Corner Bar. The crowd erupted in applause. Aunt Cecilia grabbed Stella's hand, pulling her toward the small stage. Rachel whooped from the booth. Lorena was actually jumping up and down. Stella accepted the certificate, genuinely happy for the first time since seeing Vanessa's hand on Owen's arm. She was smiling, thanking the judges, when Vanessa's voice cut through the celebration. Impressive what a newcomer can accomplish in such little time, Vanessa said, loud enough for half the square to hear. Must have some very persuasive talents. The implication was clear. Ugly. The crowd went silent. Stella's face burned. She stood frozen on the stage, the certificate suddenly heavy in her hands. She lifted her chin, refusing to let Vanessa see how the words had landed. Then Owen moved. He crossed the space between them in long strides, stopping directly in front of Vanessa. The entire festival watched. The only talent Stella has, Owen said, his voice cutting and cold, is hard work, courage, and more dignity than anyone in this square. He paused, his eyes sweeping the crowd, before landing back on Vanessa. Especially you. He turned away from his ex-girlfriend without another word, his eyes finding Stella on the stage. The message was clear. He was choosing, publicly, definitively. Vanessa left, her face red with humiliation. No one followed her. Stella descended from the stage on shaking legs, the certificate clutched in her hands. The festival continued around them, but she barely noticed. Owen had defended her, in front of everyone. She needed to find him, needed to talk to him, needed to... He went toward the vineyard, Cecilia said softly, appearing at her elbow. The oak barrels, probably. His thinking spot. Stella looked at her aunt, then at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. Go, Rachel said. Before you both overthink this to death. Stella went. Stella found him exactly where Cecilia said he'd be, standing among the oak barrels in the aging room, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. The distant sounds of the festival filtered through the walls, but here it was quiet, intimate. The air smelled of wine and wood and possibility. Owen, she said softly. He turned, and the vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. This wasn't the guarded man who'd refused her wine order, or the proud vintner who kept his distance. This was someone stripped bare. You came, he said, like he'd half expected her not to. Of course I came. Stella moved closer, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. You just publicly eviscerated your ex-girlfriend in my defense. Did you think I wouldn't? I don't know what I thought. He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture again. I just knew I couldn't stand there and let her say those things about you. Thank you, Stella said quietly, for defending me. I shouldn't have had to. I should have made it clear weeks ago that Vanessa and I were done, that there was never going to be anything between us again. He took a step toward her. I should have made a lot of things clear. Like what? Like the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you crashed into my truck. The words came out rough, honest. Like the fact that every argument we have is the best part of my day. Like the fact that watching you build something beautiful out of that bar made me realize I've been hiding in this vineyard for 5 years, too scared to want anything more. Stella's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Owen, I don't want to pretend anymore, Stella. He closed the distance between them, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't want to pretend I don't care. I don't want to keep finding excuses to see you. I don't want to stop myself from what? She whispered. From this. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Stella's eyes fluttered closed at the touch, every nerve ending suddenly alive. Are you going to stop again? She asked, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Like you did during the storm. No. His voice was rough with promise. Not this time. When Owen kissed her, it was nothing like Stella had imagined, and she'd imagined it more times than she cared to admit. It was better, deeper, more. His lips were soft but demanding, one hand still cradling her face, while the other slid to her waist, pulling her closer. Stella's hands found his chest, then his shoulders, then tangled in his hair, holding him to her like he might disappear if she let go. The kiss deepened. Years of want and frustration and denied longing pouring into it. Owen kissed like a man starving, like she was air and he'd been drowning. His hand tightened on her waist, and Stella made a sound in the back of her throat that seemed to undo something in him. He backed her gently against one of the oak barrels, his body a solid wall of heat against hers. The kiss turned hungry, desperate, both of them trying to communicate everything they'd been too scared to say. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I'm in love with you, he said, the words simple and devastating. I've been in love with you since you threw that bar towel at my head. Maybe even before that. Stella laughed, the sound shaky with emotion. I threw that towel 3 weeks ago. I know. He kissed her again, softer this time. I'm a slow learner. Owen Patterson. She pulled back just enough to look at him. I'm in love with you too. You infuriating, stubborn, impossible man. Say it again, he murmured against her lips. Which part? The love part. I love you. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, relief, the heady rush of finally letting go. Stay, Owen whispered between kisses. Not just for the bar. Stay with me. Yes, Stella breathed. Yes. Owen's house was nothing like Stella expected. From the outside it looked rustic, all weathered wood and stone. But inside it was warm, cozy. Exposed beams overhead, soft lighting, furniture that actually looked comfortable instead of decorative. Nicholas is with his mother in the city, Owen said, closing the door behind them. We're alone. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Stella turned to face him, her heart racing. Are you nervous? Owen asked softly, stepping closer. Terrified, she admitted. You? Same. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. We can slow down. We don't have to. Stella kissed him, pouring every ounce of want and need into it. When she pulled back, Owen's eyes had darkened. Or we can not slow down, he murmured. Definitely not slowing down. He kissed her again, deeper this time, walking her backward until her legs hit the couch. But instead of pushing her down, he swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the stairs. Showing off. Stella laughed against his neck. Maybe a little. His voice was rough with desire. I've wanted this, wanted you for so long. I'm not rushing it. The bedroom was simple, masculine, but Stella barely noticed the details. All her focus was on Owen as he set her down gently, his hands already finding the zipper of her dress. You're so beautiful, he breathed, his fingers trembling slightly as he slid the fabric down her shoulders. I've thought about this so many times. Yeah? Stella's hands went to his shirt buttons, fumbling slightly. Tell me, every time you argued with me, he kissed her shoulder, every time you threw something at my head, another kiss, lower, every time you smiled at Nicholas, like he was the most important person in the world. The dress pooled at her feet. Owen's hands mapped her body with reverent slowness, like he was memorizing every curve, every soft place. When Stella reached for his belt, he caught her hands. Let me, he said, let me take care of you. And he did. With touches that made her gasp, kisses that made her forget her own name, whispered words that made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. Owen worshipped her body with a devotion that bordered on overwhelming, his hands and mouth learning what made her sigh, what made her arch into his touch. When they finally came together, it was with the intensity that stole Stella's breath. Owen moved with controlled passion, his eyes never leaving hers, one hand tangled with hers above her head, while the other explored with devastating precision. I love you, he murmured against her lips, her throat, her shoulder. "I love you." Stella pulled him closer, wrapping herself around him, giving herself over to the pleasure and the emotion and the rightness of being with him. They moved together like they'd been doing this for years, finding a rhythm that built and built until they both shattered. Later, much later, they lay tangled together, skin damp, hearts still racing. Owen traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, his other arm keeping her tucked against his side. "Stay," he whispered into her hair. "I'm not going anywhere," Stella promised. Stella woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She stretched, deliciously sore, and pulled on Owen's shirt before padding downstairs. She found him in the kitchen, shirtless and beautiful, scrambling eggs. "Morning," he said, his smile soft and intimate. "Morning." She accepted the coffee he offered, watching him cook. "This is domestic. Get used to it." He slid eggs onto 2 plates, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Stella took it, confused. "What's this?" "Banking information." She looked at the numbers, then at him. "You're finally letting me pay for the truck?" "No." Owen's eyes sparkled with mischief. "That's the account information for the joint account I'm opening, for when you want to marry me." Stella's mouth fell open. "What?" "You heard me. Owen Patterson. We've been together for less than 24 hours, and I've been in love with you for weeks." He moved closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm not asking you to marry me today, I'm just planning ahead." Stella grabbed a dish towel and threw it at his head. He caught it, laughing, really laughing, the sound bright and free and completely unguarded. "You're insane," she said, but she was smiling. "About you?" "Absolutely." He pulled her into his arms, swaying slightly like they were dancing. "So what do you say? To marriage?" "Eventually." Stella looked up at the man who'd driven her crazy in the best possible way, who'd defended her in public, who'd loved her with such devastating tenderness last night. "Eventually," she agreed. "Definitely eventually." 3 months later, Cecilia's corner bar was everything Stella had dreamed it could be. The renovation had transformed the space into something warm and inviting. Exposed brick walls, soft lighting, intimate seating arrangements, and most importantly, a wine display featuring Patterson Vineyard's finest labels. Owen had insisted on supplying his premium selection, refusing to accept anything less. "If we're doing this," he'd said, pulling her into his arms, "we're doing it right." Now the bar was thriving, drawing locals and tourists alike. Wine enthusiasts came for the carefully curated selection, food lovers for Aunt Cecilia's updated menu, and everyone seemed to enjoy the story of how the bar's owner had literally crashed into the local vintner's life. Stella stood behind the bar, watching Owen interact with customers at a table near the window. He'd become a regular fixture here, splitting his time between the vineyard and helping her manage the growing business. Nicholas sat next to him, coloring while his uncle answered questions about harvest techniques. "You're staring," Rachel said, appearing at her elbow. She was visiting for the 3rd time since the wine festival, claiming she couldn't stay away from the small-town romance novel unfolding. "I'm appreciating," Stella corrected. "Sure you are," Rachel grinned. "So when's he going to propose properly?" "That joint account thing was cute, but I'm waiting for the grand gesture." "Maybe he's not the grand gesture type. Please. The man publicly defended you in front of the entire town. He's absolutely the grand gesture type." Before Stella could respond, Owen caught her eye and winked. Her stomach still did that stupid flip thing whenever he looked at her like that. That evening, the bar hosted a celebration for reaching their 6-month anniversary. The place was packed. Locals, friends, even Marcus and Lorena had come to celebrate. Stella was behind the bar, laughing at something Aunt Cecilia said, when she noticed Nicholas standing near the door, holding something. It was a sign, hand-drawn in bright crayon. "She said yes." Stella's heart stopped. She looked up, searching for Owen, and found him standing in the center of the bar, every eye suddenly on him. "Owen?" Her voice came out shaky. He crossed to her, taking her hand and pulling her from behind the bar. The crowd parted, giving them space. "Stella Morrison," he said, and his voice was steady, even though his hand trembled slightly in hers. "You crashed into my truck 5 months ago and turned my entire life upside down." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Stella's eyes were already burning with tears. "You're stubborn, infuriating, and you've thrown more things at my head than I can count." Owen's smile was soft. "You're also brilliant, brave, and the best thing that's ever happened to me." He dropped to one knee. The bar erupted in gasps and excited murmurs. Stella's free hand flew to her mouth. "I don't want to wait for eventually," Owen said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and argue about restaurant suppliers and watch you build amazing things. I want Nicholas to officially call you Aunt instead of Miss Stella. I want everything with you starting now." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Stella looked at the man kneeling before her, at Nicholas holding his hopeful sign, at Aunt Cecilia crying happy tears, at Rachel filming the whole thing on her phone. "Yes," she said, laughing through tears. "Yes, of course, yes." The bar exploded in cheers as Owen slid the ring onto her finger and stood sweeping her into his arms and kissing her thoroughly while everyone applauded. Nicholas ran over, tugging on Owen's shirt. "She said yes, I knew she would." Owen picked up his nephew with one arm, keeping the other around Stella. "How did you know?" "Because she looks at you the way you look at her," Nicholas said matter-of-factly. "Like you're her favorite person." Stella kissed Owen's cheek. "He's a smart kid." "He gets it from me," Owen said, grinning. Aunt Cecilia opened a bottle of Patterson Vineyard's best vintage, the one Owen had been saving for a special occasion, and the celebration continued late into the night. 1 year later, Stella stood in the kitchen of the home she now shared with Owen, the rustic house that had become theirs, with Nicholas's artwork on the fridge and her books mixed with his on the shelves. She was making a sugar-free dessert for Nicholas, who was visiting for the weekend. Her hand rested unconsciously on the gentle curve of her belly, still small enough that most people didn't notice. Owen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his hand over hers on her stomach. "Still can't believe we're going to be parents," he murmured against her neck. "Believe it." Stella leaned back into his warmth. "In 5 months you'll be changing diapers at 3 in the morning. Can't wait." The bar was thriving beyond their wildest dreams, featured in regional magazines as a must-visit destination. The vineyard had expanded, not toward the bar's property, but in the opposite direction, toward the hills. "You know," Owen said, pressing a kiss below her ear, "Nicholas still tells everyone you hit my truck on purpose." "I did not hit it on purpose. He's convinced you took one look at me and decided you had to have me." Stella turned in his arms, looping hers around his neck. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Because you did keep the dent. You refused to fix it. Because it's my favorite conversation starter." He kissed her softly. "The day my whole life changed." "You're impossible," Stella said, but she was smiling. "And you're mine." Owen pulled her closer, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. "Forever." "Forever," Stella agreed. Outside, the vineyard stretched toward the horizon. The bar stood proud on its corner, and life was exactly as chaotic and beautiful as she'd never known she wanted. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.